In a world ruled by magic, humanity is pushed to the brink by a terrifying demon king. Cities burn, armies collapse, and ordinary soldiers can do little against the monster's overwhelming power. 4 exceptional mages finally stand together to end the war. Each has mastered a different element, and they coordinate their attacks against an enemy strong enough to devastate the land around them. Among these warriors is Eftel, an aging wind mage who has spent his entire life chasing the highest level of magic. The battle is violent and destructive, but the 4 refuse to retreat. Their elemental powers strike the Demon King from every direction until the enemy is finally destroyed. Humanity survives, the ruined land falls silent, and the 4 mages return as heroes, who accomplish what entire armies could not. After peace is restored, the heroes are summoned to the royal palace and honored before the kingdom. The king praises the 4 great warriors who defeated the Demon King and grants each of them a title representing the summit of magical achievement. These titles are normally tied to the highest levels of nobility, yet the heroes are given permission to bear them because their power and service have surpassed ordinary status. Eftel is named the Lightning Emperor. The announcement overwhelms him. At 44 years old, after decades of hardship and training, his entire life has finally been recognized in the most public way possible. The crowd celebrates the newly created 4 emperors while Eftel stands among the greatest mages in history. For a brief moment, the recognition feels like the perfect reward for every sacrifice he made. Years pass, and Eftel grows old without abandoning magic. He lives in a secluded estate surrounded by mountains and spends his remaining years teaching a group of young disciples. His most talented student is Merlin, a white-haired girl with exceptional natural ability and fierce devotion to her master. During their outdoor lessons, Eftel makes the students practice controlling their magic circles and maintaining concentration. He refuses to let them rush into advanced spells before mastering the fundamentals, because unstable power is useless when a mage cannot sustain it. Merlin proudly considers herself the Lightning Emperor's finest disciple, but that pride also makes her impatient. She wants to grow strong enough to take over Eftel's duties, teach the other students, and allow her aging master to rest. Eftel's lessons are shaped by the war he survived. He remembers that not everyone on the opposing side was a willing enemy, and that innocent lives were caught in the destruction. Even after becoming a celebrated hero, he understands that power without judgment can harm people who never chose to fight. This is why he emphasizes control, patience, and responsibility, instead of simply praising stronger spells. Merlin listens to his instruction, yet her concern for his weakening body keeps pushing her toward faster results. She believes that if she can prove herself immediately, Eftel will no longer need to carry the burden of guiding everyone. Her motive comes from love and loyalty, but her desire to protect him gradually turns into recklessness. Without Eftel's permission, Merlin enters a forbidden forest and searches for a powerful monster. Her plan is to defeat it alone, become the best of his disciples, and demonstrate that she can lead the others in his place. Deep among the trees, she confronts an enormous beast that appears vulnerable enough for her magic. Merlin forms her spell and calls upon the wind and lightning spirits, releasing an attack far beyond what most young students could manage. A level 4 spell crashes into the monster, and for a moment she believes she has won. She smiles with relief, convinced that her gamble has succeeded. Then the creature rises from the smoke without meaningful damage. Merlin realizes too late that she misjudged its strength. The beast charges, strikes her down, and leaves her injured on the forest floor, with no power left to protect herself. Eftel arrives before the monster can finish her. He is angry because he explicitly warned Merlin to stay away from this region, but he is more concerned by the reason she ignored him. Eftel acknowledges that she has the greatest natural talent among his students, then explains that talent does not excuse impatience. Strength seized in a hurry is fragile, and can slip away before its owner understands how to control it. The monster interrupts his lecture and attacks again. Irritated, Eftel activates a level 10 spell bearing his own name and erases the creature in a single overwhelming strike. Merlin is stunned by the enormous difference between her master and herself. Eftel does not use the victory to boast. He treats it as proof that she must return to the basics, rest properly, and build power that will remain dependable when her life is in danger. Later, Merlin discovers that Eftel's strict training is hiding a painful truth. His health has deteriorated, and she sees him coughing blood when he believes no one is watching. Eftel admits that he has little time left, but he still refuses to stop studying and teaching. Merlin asks why someone already honored as the Lightning Emperor continues pushing a dying body. He first says he wants to raise talented successors such as her, yet that is only part of his reason. Eftel once dreamed of becoming the strongest mage in the world. Defeating the Demon King, receiving a legendary title, and training gifted disciples never erase that ambition. Merlin insists that he is already the greatest, but Eftel remembers the final battle differently. The other 3 emperors were younger and naturally brilliant. Eftel was the oldest member, and the only one struggling desperately to keep pace. What appeared effortless for them required extraordinary preparation from him. News soon arrives that another of the 4 emperors has established a method for measuring magical aptitude. For centuries, identifying a person's natural element required years of study. The new procedure uses strands of hair placed into 4 special magical liquids, representing fire, earth, water, and wind. The brightness and depth of each color reveal an aptitude ranging from E rank to S rank. Eftel immediately understands how important the discovery could be. Magic academies currently teach every element before deciding which one suits a student. If aptitude can be identified during childhood, each person could begin specialized training much earlier. Eftel prepares the test and asks Merlin to try it first. Her water and wind samples shine with deep blue and green light, revealing S-rank aptitude in both elements. Her fire result is C rank and her earth result is B rank. The readings match everything Eftel observed while raising her, confirming that the method works. After seeing Merlin's accurate results, Eftel asks to test himself. Merlin thinks the procedure is unnecessary, because a man recognized as the Lightning Emperor must possess extraordinary talent. Eftel still needs to know. He trained dozens or even hundreds of times harder than the other emperors, yet he never closed the final distance between them. The 4 liquids remain completely transparent. According to the published theory, a colorless result means no aptitude at all, and no blessing from any elemental spirit. Merlin refuses to believe that conclusion. They repeat every step, suspecting a mistake in the materials or procedure, but the liquids never change. The result explains Eftel's entire life. He always learned new magic more slowly than the people around him. Relentless effort allowed him to rise above ordinary mages and earn a legendary title, but against naturally gifted rivals, effort alone could never completely remove the difference. The discovery breaks the hope that sustained Eftel for decades. As his illness worsens, he realizes that the summit he pursued was blocked from the beginning by a lack of aptitude he never knew existed. Alone in his room, he remembers spending his whole life believing that more study and more time would eventually be enough. He feels ashamed for wanting more after receiving fame, respect, students, and the title of Lightning Emperor. Even so, his regret cannot be silenced. If his body had lasted longer, he would have continued training regardless of how small the chance of success became. His final thoughts are not about the kingdom that praised him, but about the magical height he could never reach. Eftel dies consumed by frustration, repeating that he needed more time. Instead of disappearing, Eftel awakens in a strange dark space he recognizes from before his life in the magical world. A goddess greets him and reminds him of the abilities he received more than 50 years earlier. One skill, Indomitable, strengthened his refusal to surrender and helped him pursue a single goal throughout his lifetime. The second, Reincarnation, has now become available again. The goddess offers to send him into another life and allows him to select 2 new bonus abilities, even suggesting faster growth. Eftel declines every additional advantage. All the magical knowledge he accumulated remains inside his mind. He believes that if he receives a healthy body and enough time, he can do the rest through his own effort. The goddess observes that his determination is greater than the skill meant to support it, then sends him onward to begin his third life. Eftel wakes in the body of a 4-year-old boy, as memories from his previous existence begin flowing back. He studies his reflection and slowly understands that he has been born into a later era while keeping the identity of the old Lightning Emperor. His affectionate mother finds him awake, embraces him so tightly that he can barely breathe, and calls him to breakfast. As he sits with his family, Eftel connects the fragments in his mind. This is his third life, made possible by the reincarnation skill, and the knowledge he spent decades gathering has returned with him. Instead of mourning his death, he sees the new childhood as the time he desperately wanted at the end of his previous life. He now has a young body, years ahead of him, and another chance to pursue the summit of magic. After breakfast, Eftel remembers the formula for the aptitude test and recreates it outside. He already suspects what the liquids will reveal. Every sample remains colorless, proving that his new body also lacks elemental aptitude. For an instant, he fears that this life will repeat the same limitation and stop him around the same level. Before he can examine the problem further, people nearby notice a black dragon with glowing eyes flying toward a populated area. Panic spreads as the creature heads in the direction of the capital. Eftel's first instinct is to intervene, but he hesitates when he remembers his current body. In his previous life, the Lightning Emperor could confront such danger directly. Now he appears to be an ordinary 4-year-old with no training, no adult strength, and no reason to believe his former magical power survived reincarnation. Eftel cannot ignore a dragon threatening innocent people, so he attempts the original level 10 spell he created in his previous life. He recalls the complete formula, focuses his mind, and gathers power, despite the limitations of his tiny body. A vast magic formation appears around him as blue-white lightning floods the field. The spell fires into the sky and strikes with such force that the distant land is torn apart. Witnesses can only wonder whether the destruction came from the dragon or from lightning descending from the heavens. Eftel is equally shocked. The attack proves that he did not merely retain his memories and theories. At 4 years old, he can already wield the magical power he possessed at the end of his former life. His aptitude is still colorless, but his accumulated strength has crossed into this new body with him, giving Eftel both the power and the time to challenge the summit once again. 3 years have passed since Eftel's former identity awakened inside his new body. Now 7 years old, he has spent that time reading and investigating the world around him. He discovers that this era lies 400 years after the age in which he lived as the Lightning Emperor. Eftel shares a remote country home with his mother, Iria, far from the center of the Azul Kingdom. Their quiet life is supported by Fraser, Eftel's older half-brother, who travels a great distance every month to bring them living expenses. Fraser is impressed that such a young child can understand difficult books and promises to bring more during his next visit. Eftel is grateful, but he still asks the question Fraser cannot answer. He has never met his father and wants to know when the man will finally make time to see him. Eftel's father is Duke Orcott, an influential nobleman at the center of the kingdom's magical establishment. He is also a distant descendant of Eftel from his first life, which makes the reincarnated sage curious about what became of his bloodline. However, Iria has no magical aptitude. The Duke's lawful wife and other members of the household despised a woman without aptitude for bearing a child connected to such a prestigious magical family. Iria and Eftel were driven into this isolated region, and the Duke never formally recognized the boy as his son. Fraser is the second son of the legal wife, yet he could not ignore their mistreatment. He continued caring for them, delivering money and supervising Eftel's education. Eftel recognizes Fraser as a genuinely kind person, but family recognition matters less to him than receiving another chance to study magic. When Fraser asks what future he wants, Eftel eagerly says that he intends to enter a magic academy at 15. Iria gently reminds him that he inherited her lack of aptitude. Because aptitude testing is now common, the result is already known, so she plans to have him learn swordsmanship and attend a military academy instead. Fraser approves. He once rebelled against the family's magical tradition by choosing the military academy, graduated at the top of his class, and became a valuable magic swordsman. Since he has time that day, he offers to examine Eftel's swordsmanship. During the lesson, Eftel realizes why Fraser has filled his education with military studies and general subjects. His brother has been preparing him for this path from the beginning. Fraser corrects his grip and praises his potential, believing he has found a future suitable for a child without magical talent. Eftel appreciates the concern behind Fraser's plan, but he finally admits that he truly wants to study at a magic academy. Fraser warns him that every person has strengths and weaknesses, and that forcing himself into an unsuitable discipline may only bring pain. Eftel answers that having no elemental aptitude does not mean he has no mana. He can still use magic, and 400 years of change may have produced new knowledge capable of breaking the limit that defeated him in his former life. Unable to explain reincarnation, Eftel simply insists that attending a magic academy is essential. Fraser offers a practical test. He will cast a spell, and if Eftel can reproduce even part of it, Fraser will ask the family to recommend him. Fraser expects the impossible challenge to make the child accept reality without crushing his dream through words alone. Fraser calls upon the wind spirit Sylph and carefully performs a level 2 spell called Wind Edge. After a full incantation, a glowing magic circle appears and releases a blade of wind through the forest. Fraser proudly presents the technique as an advanced achievement. Eftel only asks whether that is all he must reproduce. Without chanting and with almost no delay, the 7-year-old releases his own wind attack. The spell is far stronger than Fraser's demonstration, ripping through the trees with power closer to level 4. Eftel apologizes because he meant to imitate the original spell, but misjudged the output of his young body. Fraser cannot process what he has witnessed. Level 4 is considered exceptional in the modern era, and instant chantless casting should only be possible after decades of training. A child officially recorded as having no aptitude has just performed both as if they were ordinary techniques. Eftel cannot reveal that he is the reincarnated Lightning Emperor, so he gives Fraser a vague explanation. He says the magical knowledge and power he studied are being planted into his young body and brain, and that he is still training himself to handle them. He casually adds that he could eventually use level 10 magic. The statement overwhelms Fraser so completely that he collapses. As Eftel watches over him, he considers the strange reactions surrounding his power. When he defeated the dragon at 4 years old, the adults assumed that a god had saved them. Fraser now treats abilities from Eftel's old era as unbelievable miracles. After comparing modern spell levels with his former knowledge, Eftel reaches a disturbing conclusion. During the last 4 centuries, magical civilization declined severely. Advanced techniques vanished, and knowledge once available to great mages has become lost technology. When Fraser regains consciousness, Eftel avoids another crisis by claiming that debris from the wind edge struck his head and confused his memory. Fraser accepts the explanation, and Eftel decides that he must practice magic only in secret until he understands the modern world better. For the time being, he also pretends to accept the military academy plan. Fraser resumes sword training and repeatedly defeats him for charging without observing his opponent. Eftel has no desire to become an ordinary soldier, but the more often he loses, the more determined he becomes to improve. He challenges Fraser again and again, strengthening his body and correcting his technique. By the time he reaches 10 years old, swordsmanship no longer feels like an unwanted obligation. Eftel begins enjoying it and imagines becoming the strongest kind of magic swordsman, combining the martial skill of this life with the magic preserved from his previous one. Fraser continues teaching Eftel 3 times each week. One day, he announces a special lesson and introduces Moria, the enormous former captain of the Azul Kingdom's Knight Order. Moria invites Eftel to attack however he likes, but the boy immediately senses that the veteran has left no opening. When Eftel remains still, Moria attacks first. His speed is so great that Eftel cannot even follow the path of the sword. Eftel reinforces his body with internal mana and finally begins reacting to the strikes. Moria is surprised that a child with no magical aptitude can perform physical enhancement. Fraser explains that he noticed faint mana gathering in Eftel's hands during training. Although Eftel supposedly cannot use magic, his control over the mana inside his body is as smooth as that of an experienced mage or swordsman. Eftel knows that offensive magic would let him defeat Moria easily, but winning that way would make the entire sword lesson meaningless. He wants to overcome the veteran through martial ability alone. Moria relentlessly exposes the weaknesses created by Eftel's incomplete technique, short reach, and childish muscles. He declares that Eftel has challenged him 3 years too early and moves to finish the fight. At that moment, Eftel's body reacts before conscious thought. He remembers a grappling technique learned in another world during an even earlier life, redirects Moria's weight, and throws the massive man to the ground. Moria bursts into laughter, admits defeat, and announces that Eftel has passed. Fraser then reveals the important detail he deliberately withheld. Moria is now the principal of the Azul Kingdom's military academy, and this duel was Eftel's entrance examination. His place at the school has been secured years in advance. Eftel is bewildered that his future was arranged without his consent, while Moria insists that he only lost the examination and still won the sword fight. More years pass. Eftel continues martial training in public and practices high-level magic where no one can observe him. During violent storms, he uses the thunder, rain, and darkness to hide every flash and explosion. By 14, he can cast extremely powerful lightning spells, although the highest levels still have a slight delay. Fraser worries about him training outside in dangerous weather and reminds him that he will enter the military academy the following year. Eftel knows that 15 is considered adulthood in this world, and he has already made a private decision. Once he comes of age, he will leave home and use his knowledge to earn entry into a magic academy, even if the universal aptitude system makes that path extremely difficult. Before Eftel can act on that plan, Fraser brings unexpected news. Duke Orcott has finally agreed to meet him. Iria is overwhelmed with happiness and believes 14 years of struggle have at last earned her son recognition from his father. Eftel privately sees little value in meeting a man who ignored them for so long. However, Iria embraces him with tears, and even Fraser becomes emotional while remembering everything the family endured. These two people have loved and supported Eftel without demanding anything in return. He cannot bear to disappoint them, so he agrees to visit the Duke. When they arrive at the enormous Orcott estate, Eftel feels some genuine anticipation despite himself. Duke Orcott is not only his current father, he is also Eftel's descendant, giving the former Lightning Emperor a rare opportunity to see the legacy of his original family. Fraser formally presents Eftel, who politely introduces himself and says he has always wanted to meet his father. Duke Orcott immediately destroys every expectation. He orders the boy to address him by title because he has never acknowledged Eftel as his son. Then he calls the child a disgrace. According to the Duke, someone born into the bloodline of the legendary Lightning Emperor while possessing no magical aptitude would make their great ancestor weep. Eftel silently agrees that the Lightning Emperor is close to tears, but only because his descendant has become such an arrogant and unpleasant man. Since Eftel himself is the ancestor being discussed, the Duke's lecture is painfully absurd. Still, Eftel remains calm for Iria and Fraser, rather than exposing his true identity or escalating the confrontation. The Duke's mood appears to improve when he mentions Eftel's special admission to the military academy. For a moment, Eftel wonders whether the man may feel some pride after all. The truth is much uglier. The scholarship will cover Eftel's food and accommodation, then provide an allowance beginning in the 3rd year. Duke Orcott is celebrating because he can stop sending money to Iria and her son. He tells Eftel to work hard only so he will not stain the family name. Eftel realizes that the meeting was never about recognition, affection, or concern for his future. His father summoned him simply to announce that supporting him is no longer financially necessary. The excitement Iria and Fraser felt has been exploited for the Duke's convenience, confirming Eftel's worst impression of the man. Even that announcement is not the Duke's true purpose. He calls for a man named Joachim and orders him to examine Eftel's strength. Although the Duke describes Eftel as a child born from a passing whim, other people may still connect the boy to the Orcott family. He wants proof that Eftel will not embarrass the household once he enters the military academy. Joachim accepts with open enthusiasm and speaks of the assignment as if he were disciplining a dog. Fraser immediately objects to forcing such cruelty on a 14-year-old, but the Duke refuses to reconsider. Watching the exchange, Eftel finally understands why he was brought to the estate. The long-awaited meeting with his father was only preparation for another test, and Joachim is eager to begin it. Before the practice match begins at the Orcott estate, Fraser quietly warns Eftel to remain careful. Joachim is cruel and arrogant, but his skill with a sword is real, and he achieved outstanding results during his student years. Fraser tells Eftel to surrender immediately if the fight becomes dangerous. Joachim has no intention of conducting a harmless test. He throws Eftel a heavy training sword and explains that a full strike can break bones or crush a skull. He then identifies himself as the eldest son of the main Orcott household and mocks Eftel for not understanding why he was summoned. Joachim says no one in the family ever welcomed Iria or her child. In his view, a woman without magical aptitude had no right to bear a son in an important magical bloodline, especially when that son also lacked aptitude. His insults become vicious enough that he says he would rather kill Iria and will settle for hurting Eftel instead. Hearing his mother threaten destroys Eftel's restraint. He cannot believe that such a disgusting man is one of his descendants. Joachim attacks with the confidence of an experienced swordsman, only to discover that Eftel can read every movement. The boy reinforces his body with mana, blocks the heavy weapon, and counters with speed Joachim cannot follow. Within moments, Eftel knocks him down and places the training blade at his throat. He gives Joachim one warning. If he ever insults Iria again, Eftel will kill him. The pressure surrounding the normally gentle boy shocks everyone watching. When the match ends, Eftel calmly returns to Iria. She is frightened by the cold expression she just witnessed and asks whether he is still the son she knows. Eftel reassures her that he has not changed. Duke Orcott offers no apology and merely tells him to work hard at the military academy the following year. Eftel and Iria return to their isolated home expecting retaliation from the Orcott family. 2 quiet weeks pass without any attack. One evening, while Iria prepares Eftel's favorite food, armed visitors suddenly arrive. Fraser has brought the young crown prince of the Azul Kingdom and members of the royal guard. The kingdom's regular knights and main army are away on a major expedition against a neighboring country, leaving the capital with limited protection. Fraser has discovered that a powerful ministerial faction intends to exploit that absence and assassinate the prince. He chose Iria's distant home as an emergency hiding place because the conspirators would have little reason to search there. The danger is immediate, however, and remaining in one location will only make it easier for the enemy to surround them. Fraser explains the succession conflict behind the assassination plan. In the previous royal generation, the younger brother became king because he was more capable, while the elder brother became a minister. For years the king had no son, so the minister's eldest child was expected to inherit the throne. That expectation ended when the crown prince was born, destroying the elder branch's path to power. The minister's supporters now want the boy removed before the royal army returns. Fraser suspects that Duke Orcott helped the conspirators enter the capital, since a change in succession would greatly increase the duke's influence. The palace is no longer safe, so Fraser plans to escort the prince through Neil Forest, cross the border, and reach the kingdom's main military force. Once the prince is under the army's protection, the coup can no longer succeed through a secret assassination. Eftel asks to accompany the escort. 400 years earlier, the king of this same land provided essential supplies during the campaign against the Demon King, and Eftel still feels indebted to the kingdom. He also refuses to ignore a crime connected to his descendants. Iria is frightened, but Eftel apologizes for worrying her and promises to return. He joins Fraser, the prince, and the guards as they enter Neil Forest. The journey soon feels unnatural. No birds or animals can be heard anywhere, and thunderous sounds echo through the trees despite no clear storm overhead. Fraser decides that standing still would be even more dangerous and urges the group toward the forest exit. Their enemies have already prepared the ground, and the strange silence is the first sign that the escort has walked into an organized ambush. Near the exit, the group discovers an entire court mage unit blocking the road. Retreat is impossible because the path behind them is burning. The mysterious sounds were produced by attackers, setting sections of the forest on fire, trapping the prince between flames and a fully prepared magical force. The guards desperately search for another route, but there is none. The crown prince still hopes the conflict can end without more bloodshed. He proposes approaching the conspirators unarmed and offering them one final chance to withdraw. If they return to the capital, he is willing to resolve the incident through negotiation rather than immediate punishment. Fraser believes his father may still listen, so he steps forward to appeal directly to Duke Orcott while the others remain ready to protect the prince. Duke Orcott leaves the formation as though he has accepted the request. Fraser is relieved and asks whether his father is finally willing to talk. The Duke answers that he has understood one thing. Fraser has become an obstacle and must be removed. Without hesitation, he unleashes a level 6 great spell carrying the legendary name of Eftel. The attack strikes Fraser before anyone can intervene and throws him violently to the ground. Eftel rushes to his brother, but Fraser does not respond. The Duke and Joachim show no remorse. To them, Fraser's life is a minor sacrifice in their attempt to seize political power. Eftel remembers the brother who brought food, paid their expenses, taught him patiently, and protected Iria, despite the hostility of his own household. Seeing that kindness repaid with attempted murder turns Eftel's grief into a cold and terrifying rage. Eftel stands between the escort and the enemy mages and promises to show them how real magic is used. He begins with a level 9 spell called Caucidus. An immense wave of ice races across the battlefield and freezes the burning forest almost instantly. Flames, trees, and the ground itself disappear beneath a frozen landscape. The court mages cannot understand how one child produced magic on such a scale. Modern civilization has declined so badly that most of them have never heard of a person controlling a spell at this level alone. Eftel admits that water magic was never his specialty, making their inability to resist it even more humiliating. Duke Orcott finally realizes that the boy confronting him is Eftel, but instead of reconsidering, he orders the entire Mage Corps to attack and display the power of the kingdom's elite force. The Corps casts a level 5 explosion spell and bombards Eftel from every direction. His companions fear that the concentrated blast has killed him, yet the smoke clears with Eftel completely unharmed. A defensive magic circle has remained around his body the entire time. To Eftel, maintaining constant protection is elementary training, but the modern soldiers do not even recognize the technique. Their coordinated attack cannot penetrate what he considers a basic defense. The Corps then uses its greatest weapon, another level 6 spell carrying Eftel's legendary name. Furious that such weak magic has been attached to his reputation, Eftel erases the attack with an extra magic guard. The soldiers begin to understand that their strongest techniques are not merely weaker than his. They belong to a degraded system of magic that cannot even reach the standards of his former era. Eftel draws the sword Fraser taught him to use and moves into the enemy formation. He could destroy everyone from a distance, but fighting with the blade allows him to honor the brother who spent years correcting his mistakes. He combines body reinforcement, swordsmanship, and magic placed along the weapon. Even a small level 2 spell, carried by the blade, tears through the soldiers' defenses. Eftel attacks their openings, warns them not to talk during battle, and punishes anyone who turns his back. The techniques Fraser drilled into him now let him dominate close combat as easily as magic. With the mage formation broken, Eftel prepares a final display. The sky darkens and power gathers overhead. The terrified soldiers believe he is controlling the weather through lost magic, but Eftel corrects them. Clouds are not the force under his command, he is gathering lightning itself. Eftel releases a level 10 extra spell, and a colossal thunderstrike crashes over the enemy force. The battlefield disappears inside blue-white light, leaving the Court Mage Corps defeated and the assassination plot destroyed. Duke Orcott still tries to condemn Eftel for rebelling against the kingdom's forces. Eftel reminds him that those forces attempted to murder the crown prince. A man willing to kill the heir, betray the kingdom, and sacrifice his own sons has no right to speak about loyalty. The conspiracy can no longer be hidden. The coup ends in failure, and both Duke Orcott and Joachim are exposed as traitors. They are publicly executed for their crimes. Eftel does not celebrate their deaths. His first concern is returning to Fraser and learning whether the brother who protected him can still be saved. Fraser survives because a necklace absorbed the force of the Duke's spell. The relic is Oberon's Guard, a magical item Eftel personally used 400 years ago before it became an Orcott family heirloom. An artifact from his former life has protected the person who treated him as family in his new one. Eftel embraces Fraser and finally releases the fear that he had lost him. The crown initially considers stripping the entire Orcott household of its noble rank because of the coup. Fraser's willingness to risk his life for the crown prince changes that judgment. With the former duke gone, Fraser becomes the new head of the family and preserves its title. Iria can finally live without depending on relatives who despised her, while the person who consistently supported her son now controls the household that once cast them aside. After the crisis, Eftel can no longer hide all of his power from Fraser and Iria. He demonstrates several level 7 spells in succession, leaving both of them stunned. Eftel apologizes for concealing the truth, but he still cannot safely explain that he is a reincarnated hero from 4 centuries earlier. Fraser refuses to force an answer. Power of this scale must be tied to circumstances Eftel cannot reveal, and his actions have already proven whose side he is on. The three agree to keep his abilities within the family. Fraser advises him to avoid using advanced magic in public because knowledge of such power could throw the world into confusion. Eftel accepts that warning. His secret will remain among the 3 people who now trust one another completely. When Fraser asks what he intends to do next, Eftel gives the same answer he has always given. He will attend a magic academy. Fraser cannot understand why someone stronger than the kingdom's finest mages still wants to become a student. Eftel explains that strength alone is not his goal. He needs libraries, laboratories, instructors, and access to modern research, so he can continue exploring magic and discover how to surpass the limits that stopped him in his former life. His determination is unchanged by the coup or the revelation of his power. Fraser finally accepts his decision and promises to continue teaching him swordsmanship until he turns 15. A skilled blade will still protect him when displaying magic would be dangerous. With his family supporting him and his path finally chosen, Eftel takes his first real step toward pursuing the summit of magic once again. After spending 15 years in the peaceful countryside, Eftel finally prepares to leave the home where he was raised. Iria and Fraser remind him that he is now old enough to decide what kind of life he wants, and that he will always be welcome if he chooses to return. Their kindness makes the farewell painful. Eftel thanks them for everything they have done, while the people who watched him grow struggle to hold back their tears. He bows one last time, shoulders his travel bag, and begins walking toward his new future. Although leaving his family is difficult, his purpose is clear. He refuses to accept the limits placed on his talent, and he intends to keep moving forward until he reaches the highest level of magic. With that promise in his heart, Eftel follows the road through the mountains and heads for the Magic Academy entrance examination. After traveling for some time, Eftel reaches a small roadside settlement and decides to rest at a tea house. The quiet stop is interrupted by the presence of Edwards, a famous young magician, and an A-rank adventurer. A local magic teacher respectfully approaches him and asks whether Edwards might demonstrate real magic for the village children. Edwards responds with open contempt. He says he is busy reading, boasts that reaching A rank at only 20 makes every second of his time precious, and mocks the older teacher for being only C rank at the age of 50. Even when the villagers offer to prepare a special dinner in his honor, Edwards treats them like ignorant country people. Eftel watches the exchange in silence and immediately recognizes that the celebrated adventurer has nothing but arrogance for anyone he considers beneath him. Eftel then notices that Edwards is traveling with a young demon woman bound in chains. Her name is Anastasia, and a magical slave crest has been carved into her body. Edwards casually explains that this is a special night because the slave spell has finally settled into her body. Before that process is complete, striking the crest with magical energy allows its construction to be observed, so he has been waiting for the period in which experimenting on her would still be useful. His cold explanation disgusts Eftel. Anastasia is not treated as a person, but as a possession whose pain has value only as magical research. The sight also reminds Eftel that Merlin could have suffered the same fate if he had not found and protected her centuries earlier. He wants to intervene, but before he can decide how to act without attracting attention, a terrified villager runs into the tea house and announces that a giant orc is approaching. The villagers panic because their local guild has no adventurer capable of defeating such a monster. The magic teacher quickly tells everyone not to worry, since Edwards is both an A-rank adventurer and a renowned magician. Delighted by the attention, Edwards declares that a giant orc is considered a high B-rank threat and should be easy prey for someone of his status. He steps forward to give the villagers the grand demonstration they wanted. After a long incantation, he unleashes the strongest spell he can use, a level 4 attack that fills the field with smoke and magical light. Edwards begins celebrating before the smoke has even cleared, but the monster emerges unharmed. It is not an ordinary giant orc at all. It is an orc berserker, the most powerful variant of its kind. Edwards immediately admits that even his best spell cannot defeat it, and all of his confidence disappears the moment he realizes that his own life is in danger. Rather than protect the people who trusted him, Edwards traps the villagers inside a level 3 barrier and plans to leave them behind as bait while he escapes. The frightened crowd pounds against the magical wall, begging to be released as the orc berserker closes in. Eftel cannot ignore them. He uses a level 6 Seraph Dispel without an incantation and shatters the barrier, allowing everyone to flee. The villagers are stunned that a boy can erase an A-rank magician's spell so easily, and Eftel realizes he has already revealed too much. He quickly creates another plan to hide his true ability. First, he casts a visible level 3 fire spell as camouflage. While everyone is focused on those flames, he secretly layers a level 9 attack beneath them. The disguise strike engulfs the orc berserker and destroys it, leaving the crowd convinced that Eftel somehow defeated the monster with ordinary level 3 magic. Edwards cannot understand why his level 4 spell failed while Eftel's apparent level 3 attack succeeded. The older magic teacher explains that Eftel properly shaped and refined his magical energy, giving the spell power comparable to level 5, while Edwards had neglected the basic construction of his own magic. Eftel privately suspects that an even weaker spell could have worked if it had been formed correctly. He tries to dismiss the victory as a lucky hit, hoping to avoid more attention, but the teacher clearly understands that the boy is far more capable than he claims. Eftel then turns to Edwards and condemns both his arrogance and his attempted escape. Using innocent people as bait amounts to attempted murder, even though Eftel prevented anyone from dying. A criminal has no right to own a slave, so Eftel orders Edwards to release Anastasia and turn himself in. Completely defeated and exposed before the villagers, Edwards has no choice but to obey. Once the danger is over, Eftel resumes his journey, only to realize that Anastasia is quietly following him through the rocky wasteland. When he finally asks how long she intends to continue, she kneels and begs him to become her new master. Eftel is uncomfortable with the request, but Anastasia explains that removing Edwards did not free her from the slave spell. When the magical link to a master is broken, the slave becomes dangerously unstable. Another person can seize the contract, Disobedience can bring terrible punishment, and in the worst case, the slave can die. Anastasia therefore believes that binding herself to someone kind is the safest option available. She tells Eftal that he is unquestionably better than Edwards, but Eftal still wants to understand why a demon like her became a human slave in the first place. Anastasia explains that her clan lost a war against the human kingdoms long ago. Since then, generations of her family have been born into slavery, because the system offers them no simple path back to freedom. Despite their treatment, her bloodline descends from demon royalty. She is also a distant relative of Merlin, the headmistress of a famous magic academy. The name immediately captures Eftal's attention. Anastasia knows Merlin as the greatest demon magician, a legendary sage who was raised by the ancient master Eftal himself. Only then does the boy fully grasp how much time has passed. 400 years after the life he remembers, Merlin has survived, become renowned throughout the world, and now leads a magic academy. Eftal decides that he cannot abandon one of her relatives. He agrees to become Anastasia's master for the time being, asks her name properly, and continues toward the city with her beside him. They reach the city shortly before sunset, and Anastasia is surprised to learn that her new master plans to enter the magic academy as a student. Eftal first looks for lodging, then decides they should eat well before the important examination. He chooses an expensive restaurant and assures Anastasia that money will not be a problem. Inside, the staff reluctantly guides them through a luxurious dining room, while wealthy customers openly complain about a slave being allowed inside. Anastasia automatically kneels beside Eftal's chair because she has been taught that a slave must remain below her master and be ready to move the instant she is needed. Eftal tells her that such rules have no place around him and orders her to use the seat prepared at the table. She is terrified by the idea of sitting as his equal, so Eftal turns it into a direct command. Only then can she force herself onto the soft chair. The restaurant manager objects, stating that slaves are forbidden from sitting and that the establishment serves only the upper class. He then questions whether a plainly dressed traveler like Eftal can afford the meal at all. Eftal calmly places a large dragon drop on the table and asks whether it will be enough. The staff instantly recognizes that the material is worth more than 5 million in local currency. Their contempt vanishes, and the manager apologizes while ordering the finest meat in the restaurant to be prepared. Eftal says they can keep the change and privately remembers that Fraser also gave him plenty of travel money. The pair is moved into a private room, where an enormous feast is arranged before them. For Eftal, the expensive treatment is not the important part. What matters is showing Anastasia that she will no longer be forced onto the floor simply because other people have decided she is inferior. Anastasia still hesitates to touch the food because she has never received this kind of treatment. Eftal encourages her to eat, explaining that they will be traveling together and that the meal is his way of welcoming her. He also acknowledges that years of slavery have exposed her to cruelty and unfair punishment. Even with good intentions, he might someday hurt or disrespect her without realizing it. If that happens, he wants her to object and become angry with him. Anastasia is confused because she has lived as a slave for so long that she barely understands what being angry at a master means. Eftal simplifies the lesson. When something feels wrong, she is allowed to say that she dislikes it. He then asks her to practice by directing a small display of anger at him. Her first attempt is little more than a timid sound, but he patiently urges her to try again. It is a tiny step, yet it begins teaching Anastasia that her own feelings are allowed to matter. The next day, Eftal and Anastasia arrive at the enormous Crone Magic Academy, where a huge crowd has gathered for the entrance examination. Anastasia is delighted by the new clothes Eftal has given her, and he tells her they suit her far better than the garments she wore as a slave. The academy attracts so many applicants because graduating almost guarantees stable work. Eftal suddenly suggests that Anastasia take the examination with him. Anyone is allowed to apply, and success could give her an independent future and a profession of her own. She doubts herself, but Eftal assures her that her magical talent is greater than that of most humans, especially given her connection to Merlin. Before either of them can prepare further, an examiner calls all applicants to attention and announces the first stage. The entrance test will begin with a battle royale, leaving Eftal and Anastasia surrounded by rivals as their examination finally starts. The entrance examination at Crone Magic Academy begins with 50 applicants gathered inside a wide arena. Their supervisor, Franz Bauer, introduces himself as a B-rank adventurer and explains the rules of the first test. The candidates must fight until only 5 remain inside the boundary. They may use magic, weapons, or any other method capable of knocking their rivals out of the arena. Franz expects an easy day of watching inexperienced children while collecting his payment. As soon as the battle begins, several applicants surround Anastasia because she looks like the weakest target. Franz considers this a predictable strategy, since removing vulnerable opponents first is common in a battle royale. The attackers soon discover that they have made a serious mistake. Anastasia strengthens her legs and sends the first opponent flying out of the arena with a single kick. Her sudden display immediately changes the way everyone sees her. The remaining candidates recognize Anastasia as a threat and attack her together before she can eliminate anyone else. Instead of panicking, she recites an incantation, and casts a level 3 wind spell. The blast sweeps through the arena and throws a large group of applicants beyond the boundary at once. Even Franz is stunned because this is far beyond the magic normally expected from an entrance candidate. Anastasia worries that she may have used too much power, but Eftel is pleased to see that her talent is exactly as great as he believed. When he asks whether she still needs an incantation to cast, Anastasia insists that chanting is necessary. Eftel calmly proves otherwise. During his own turn, he activates 4 level 4 wind spells simultaneously and controls their paths independently. The spells tear through the competing group and end the battle almost immediately. Franz can barely accept that a boy of Eftel's age can perform parallel casting that even many academy instructors would struggle to reproduce. After passing the battle royale, Eftel and Anastasia proceed to the written examination. Eftel mastered magical theory in his former life, so none of the questions seemed difficult to him. His only concern is the unusually large number printed on the test. He continues working until time is called and manages to answer every question. When he later tells Anastasia what he did, she is shocked. The examination was divided into specialties, and each applicant was only expected to choose and answer the questions from the field they understood best. Eftel overlooked that instruction and completed all of the sections. What appears to be a careless misunderstanding produces an extraordinary result. His final score is 958 points, a number no applicant has ever achieved since Krone Magic Academy was founded. The faculty cannot believe the result. Some teachers suspect cheating or another form of fraud, especially after reading the applicant's name, Eftel Orkot, which is identical to that of the legendary Lightning Emperor. The examiners initially assume his parents simply gave him an audacious name, but Franz arrives with a report from the practical test. He explains that Eftel cast 4 level 4 spells at the same time and guided them along separate trajectories. Merely casting one spell at that level would already be remarkable for an academy applicant. Performing 4 through parallel casting is an accomplishment difficult to match even among the faculty. Once the teachers compare the practical evidence with the written answers, they can no longer dismiss his score. They realize an applicant unlike anyone in Krone's history has appeared before them. When the results are posted, Eftel and Anastasia search the lists together. Anastasia finds her number and learns that she has passed. Eftel congratulates her, genuinely happy that she can now attend the academy and experience an ordinary life as a student. They then search for his number, 588, but it is missing from the standard list. Anastasia immediately argues that Eftel could not possibly have failed after dominating both examinations. Eftel is equally confused because everything seemed to go smoothly. He wonders whether the academy secretly measured his lack of magical aptitude and rejected him for that reason. Anastasia prepares to confront the staff, but Eftel asks her not to create an embarrassing scene. Before they leave, however, she notices a separate notice. Eftel did pass. His result was removed from the ordinary list because he has been chosen as Krone's special scholarship student and the official representative of the incoming class. The special position provides free tuition, housing, meals, and a personal allowance. It also requires Eftel to represent Krone at exchange events and participate in promotional activities for the academy. On paper, the benefits are incredible. To Eftel, however, the role sounds less like being a normal student and more like working as the school's public mascot. His reason for enrolling was to avoid attention, complete the required lessons, and spend his free time using Krone's library and research facilities. He hopes that modern knowledge will help him discover a way to overcome his lack of magical aptitude. Becoming the academy's most visible new student directly threatens that peaceful plan. Unfortunately, the selection appears to have been made without giving him any right to refuse, leaving him trapped in a position he never wanted. While Eftel considers his problem, he notices a white-haired woman elsewhere in the academy. Her appearance has matured, but he recognizes her immediately as Merlin, the disciple he knew 400 years ago. Eftel is surprised to find her at Krone because she is now the headmaster of Artina Magic Academy. More importantly, Merlin remembers her former master better than almost anyone still alive. Eftel's reincarnated body is younger, yet it retains enough of his former appearance and mannerisms that she may recognize him. If Merlin exposes him as the reborn Lightning Emperor, his quiet school life will end before it begins. He quickly guides Anastasia toward another path, pretending that he simply wants to explore more of the campus. Merlin senses something familiar and calls after him. When she asks whether he has a connection to the Lightning Emperor, Eftel claims not to understand and drags Anastasia away by saying he is hungry. During their meal, Anastasia admits that she did not recognize the woman who stopped them. She has heard of Merlin as the headmaster of Artena and as a distant relative through the Demon Lord's family, but their connection is separated by roughly 10 generations and they have never personally met. Eftel understands why Anastasia failed to notice the resemblance. Later, the new students assemble for Krone's entrance ceremony. The headmaster welcomes them, including both ordinary students and those placed in special classes, and asks everyone to study magic together regardless of rank or position. He then introduces Merlin as an honored guest from Artina Magic Academy. Eftel finally understands why she came to Krone, and hopes the formal ceremony will allow him to remain unnoticed until he can decide how to handle her suspicion. That hope disappears when the next speaker is announced. Crone calls Eftel Orcott, its special scholarship student and incoming class representative, before the entire hall. His name, record-breaking examination score, and unusual position are revealed while Merlin is watching. Eftel knows that hearing the same name as her former master will strengthen every suspicion she already has. The other students become curious about the boy who achieved the greatest score in academy history, and several classmates begin approaching him afterward. Anastasia grows frustrated when other girls gather around the person she calls her master. More importantly, Eftel can no longer avoid Merlin. Once the ceremony ends, she arranges to speak with him privately and makes it clear that she has already investigated his examination results. Merlin begins by confirming his name and then asks whether he knows the meaning of reincarnation. Her instincts were sharp even when she was young, and 4 centuries have made her far more direct. Eftel pretends not to understand, so Merlin lays out her evidence. His score looks as though the legendary Lightning Emperor personally took a child's entrance examination for amusement. The Crone instructors verified that his written answers were correct, yet many of them could not understand the reasoning behind those answers. Merlin could. Every solution followed magical theories used 400 years earlier. A normal boy living in the present should neither know those methods nor naturally solve problems exactly as her former master once did. His face, behavior, ancient knowledge, and earlier attempt to flee from her all point toward a connection he is trying to hide. For a moment, Eftel considers admitting the truth. Merlin was precious to him in his former life, and revealing that he has returned would end the uncertainty troubling her. However, that confession would also destroy his chance to quietly research magic as an ordinary student. He denies being a reincarnation, but Merlin refuses to accept a vague answer. She believes that even if reincarnation sounds impossible, he must at least have a special relationship with Eftel Orcott, the Lightning Emperor. Unable to invent a convincing explanation quickly enough, Eftel lets Anastasia provide one. She decides that if Merlin desperately wants a logical history connecting the boy to her master, they can give her a story that accounts for his knowledge without exposing his true identity. Anastasia claims that the Lightning Emperor once had a secret lover, and that their child was never revealed to the public. According to her explanation, the child possessed extraordinary magical aptitude, so the Emperor privately passed down all of his knowledge. That hidden descendant settled deep in the mountains, far from society. The family continued living in isolation for generations, preserving the Lightning Emperor's teachings while refining its own magic. Merlin objects that her master never told her about a lover or child. Eftel supports the deception with forgotten facts surrounding his former death and the political importance of the legendary 4 emperors. He then introduces himself as the 13th Eftel Orcott in that secret bloodline. The story explains his name, his old theories, and why no public record of his family exists, even though none of it is the real reason he possesses the Lightning Emperor's memories. Merlin is still hurt that her master supposedly kept such an important secret from her, but the explanation gives her something she can temporarily accept. At the same time, it awakens her competitive spirit. She tells Eftel that his alleged family is not the only one to follow the path established by the Lightning Emperor. Merlin herself has continued studying and improving her magic throughout the 400 years since her master disappeared. The young disciple Eftel remembers has become one of the greatest living demon magicians, and she wants to determine whose inherited power is closer to the original. Her desire is not simply to expose him. She wants to test the result of her own 4 centuries of dedication against the boy who carries her master's name and methods. Merlin learns that Eftel must take part in a special mock battle that afternoon as Crone's incoming representative. She asks him to use that event for a direct comparison of their magic. Eftel immediately understands the danger. Fighting the famous headmaster of Artena will attract even more attention, and displaying too much power could make his identity harder to conceal. He could refuse and protect what remains of his ordinary academy life. Yet his caution is overcome by a stronger feeling. Eftel wants to see what became of the child he once taught, and how far Merlin advanced during the 400 years they were apart. Rather than walking away, he accepts her challenge. He will enter the mock battle and witness the full strength his former disciple spent centuries developing. Before the entrance ceremony exhibition begins, Merlin privately asks Eftel to compare their magic during the afternoon mock battle. Accepting will make him stand out far more than he wants, especially because the entire academy already sees him as an unusual scholarship student. Eftel hesitates, but his desire to witness how much his former disciple has grown during the 400 years since his death is stronger than his wish to remain unnoticed. He accepts the challenge. News spreads quickly, and students fill the stands to watch a new student confront the celebrated demon hero and headmaster of Artena Magic Academy. The Academy explains that the special mock battle normally allows incoming students to experience the enormous difference between themselves and professional instructors. This year, Merlin has personally agreed to demonstrate the pinnacle of modern magic. Most spectators assume Eftel will be defeated immediately, while Anastasia nervously supports him from the stands. When the two enter the arena, Eftel looks at the powerful woman before him and remembers the young girl he once trained. He tells Merlin that he wants to see the path she has followed. Merlin agrees to begin with a test of strength, and both prepare their first spells. Eftel opens with a level 6 flare burst cast without an incantation. The audience is stunned that a first-year student can construct such advanced magic instantly, but Merlin blocks the flames with a level 7 perfect wall before they can reach her. Eftel praises the speed of her defense and admits that he underestimated what she considered a simple test. Merlin is equally surprised by his skill. She still believes he may be the 13th descendant of her teacher's hidden bloodline, but her pride will not allow a descendant to surpass the original student who received the Lightning Emperor's teachings directly. Merlin answers with her own level 6 flare burst, created with astonishing precision. Eftel realizes that he has not encountered a level 6 spell this refined since reincarnating into the modern era. Before her first attack is even finished, Merlin completes another magical structure and fires again. She explains that ordinary high-level spells require time to reconstruct, but mastery of the Lightning Emperor's methods permits silent casting and repeated attacks without delay. Eftel knows the system because he invented it to compete against the other legendary emperors. He predicts another fire attack, prepares ice magic in advance, freezes Merlin's flames, and immediately counters with level 7 Evil Frost and Icing Titan. The exchange accelerates until Merlin must answer one level 7 spell after another. Eftel continually changes the timing, direction, and structure of his attacks, challenging her to keep pace. Merlin refuses to surrender and produces her own level 7 magic, but Eftel notices small weaknesses in its construction. He calmly explains that equal spell levels do not guarantee equal strength when one structure is less stable or less efficient. His Icing Titan begins overpowering her response. Merlin becomes irritated because he is not merely attacking her. He is identifying every flaw and correcting her in the exact manner of the master she lost 4 centuries earlier. Determined to regain control, Merlin activates several level 7 spells simultaneously and hides her next movement behind the pressure of her attacks. Eftel acknowledges the achievement but warns that multicast magic consumes so much concentration that a caster must never take their eyes off the opponent. Merlin reveals that she remembers this lesson perfectly. She uses level 8 teleport to vanish and attacks from behind, believing she has finally reached his blind spot. Eftel anticipated the same tactic and prepared teleport beforehand. He escapes at the last instant, leaving Merlin's surprise attack to strike empty space while the spectators struggle to understand how either magician is moving so quickly. Merlin admits that even this strategy has failed. She should feel frustrated that techniques refined over 400 years are losing to a boy who carries her teacher's name, yet watching him fight also fills her with nostalgia. His judgment, movements, and corrections resemble Eftel too closely to ignore. Still unwilling to end the match, Merlin announces that she will reveal her final secret technique. If Eftel can withstand it, she will accept defeat. She begins constructing a level 8 Thor hammer. Eftel prepares a defensive structure, assuming he understands the famous lightning spell, but Merlin warns him that the first hammer is only one part of her true attack. Merlin forms a second Thor hammer with her other hand, then creates a third spell through the magical structures around her feet. Eftel is forced to evade the attacks and initially believes triple casting is the limit of her technique. Merlin reveals a fourth level 8 activation. An ordinary master would struggle to preserve consciousness while controlling only 2 spells of that rank, yet she can maintain one through each limb. Eftel has never seen anyone perform 4 simultaneous level 8 spells, not even during the age when magical civilization was far more advanced. He realizes that Merlin did more than preserve his teachings. She spent 4 centuries developing an original technique that surpassed her master's expectations. Rather than feeling threatened, Eftel is genuinely proud of his disciple. He praises the secret art and decides that such effort deserves an answer from the Lightning Emperor at full strength. Merlin's 4 Thor hammers descend toward him from different directions. Eftel releases his level 10 Lightning God Strike. The spell does not simply block the incoming lightning. It cancels Merlin's magical structures, absorbs the enormous electrical power, and redirects the energy into an even greater attack. The arena is swallowed by blue and golden light. The ground breaks apart, and the watching students can no longer comprehend the level of magic unfolding before them. When the light fades, Eftel safely cancels the remaining spell and releases the excess lightning back into the atmosphere. The spectators are left speechless by his control. Merlin studies everything she has witnessed, including his silent casting, his ability to predict every move, his corrections of her weaknesses, and the level 10 technique no modern magician should possess. Only one person in history could fight that way. She finally asks whether the boy standing before her is truly the reincarnation of her master, the original Eftel and legendary Lightning Emperor. Eftel knows the descendant story can no longer explain the evidence, so he stops denying the truth. Eftel confirms Merlin's conclusion and tells her that the 4-fold Thor hammer genuinely surprised him. He praises her for continuing to train without wasting the 400 years they were separated. For Merlin, those words carry more value than victory. She spent centuries protecting his knowledge, advancing his techniques, and waiting for a chance she never believed would come. Hearing her master say that she has done well gives meaning to all of that effort. Merlin breaks down in tears and embraces him. Although she has become one of the world's greatest magicians, she admits that in front of Eftel she still feels like the young disciple who wanted his approval. Anastasia sees Merlin clinging to Eftel and immediately misunderstands their relationship. Eftel explains that Merlin was his disciple in his previous life, while Anastasia is someone he rescued and now protects. Merlin accepts the explanation and asks why the reincarnated Lightning Emperor enrolled at Crone Magic Academy. Eftel says he only wants to live as a student, use the Academy's facilities, research modern magic, and continue overcoming the limitations of his new body. Merlin realizes that remaining at Crone after revealing this much will make a peaceful school life impossible. She tells Eftel and Anastasia to leave with her, because she has a better solution. Merlin leads them far from the academy and through a quiet forest. Their destination is the mansion Eftel used during his previous life. He is shocked to find the estate still standing after 4 centuries, and becomes emotional when he recognizes the familiar building. Merlin preserved the mansion and its contents throughout all those years. For her, protecting the place was another way to preserve the memory of her teacher. She invites Eftel and Anastasia to live there while she completes the documents needed to give both of them stable identities and access to the life they want. Merlin plans to register Eftel and Anastasia as her adopted children, allowing her to become their legal guardian without revealing Eftel's reincarnation or Anastasia's dangerous circumstances. The arrangement will let them use academic resources freely and remain protected by someone who understands their secrets. Merlin then activates her authority as headmaster and announces that both will be admitted immediately to Artena Magic Academy. She excitedly imagines traveling to school with Eftel, eating lunch together, and studying beside him in the library. Eftel realizes that the plan allows him to continue his magical research as an ordinary student under the protection of his former disciple. He thanks Merlin and accepts, beginning a new academy life with Anastasia, in the home that waited 400 years for his return. While Merlin is occupied with their academy enrollment, Eftel takes Anastasia beneath the estate to retrieve a sword he remembers leaving behind 400 years ago. Deep inside the stone vault, a huge red guardian blocks their path and assumes they are thieves. Eftel explains that he has come for Reincarnated, but the guardian laughs at the idea that a child could own the legendary weapon. According to him, Reincarnated is an item of the highest possible value, brought back from the Demon King's castle by the ancient Eftel himself. Only Merlin or her legendary master is permitted to enter this chamber. The guardian becomes even more hostile when Eftel speaks as if those old memories belong to him. He insults Merlin as an old woman and claims her supposedly talentless teacher must have used dishonest methods to become one of the 4 emperors. Eftel ignores the abuse and asks where the sword is. The guardian finally points it out, certain that powerful protective magic will prevent the boy from touching it. Instead, Eftel casually casts a level 8 perfect dispel without an incantation, removes the protection, and takes Reincarnated into his own hands. The guardian is still trying to understand what happened when Merlin arrives after hearing his insults from outside the estate. She angrily demands to know who called her an old woman, then immediately greets Eftel with warmth and respect. Eftel explains that he remembered Reincarnated was stored here, and wanted a proper sword now that he had begun learning swordsmanship. Merlin is delighted and even asks him to teach her someday. The guardian slowly pieces together the impossible truth. This boy used a level 8 dispelling spell without chanting, spoke about Reincarnated as its actual owner, and is treated by Merlin as her beloved master. Realizing that he has been insulting the genuine Eftel, the guardian collapses into a desperate apology. Eftel forgives him and asks him to remember both his face and Anastasia's because they will now live on the estate. Merlin is less merciful and warns that another insult will bring severe punishment. When the guardian begs Eftel for protection, Eftel refuses to challenge an angry Merlin and jokingly admits that even he finds her frightening. Later, Eftel, Merlin, and Anastasia walk through the city together. Eftel is surprised that some businesses have survived for 4 centuries, including the tailor that once made Merlin's curtains. Merlin has already arranged for the same shop to make school uniforms for Eftel and Anastasia. After enjoying tea, they hear about a citywide treasure hunt. Magical prizes have been hidden throughout the streets, and the person who finds the greatest number can keep them and win a trip to a hot spring resort. Merlin immediately wants to participate, and Eftel suspects that she cares more about the hot spring than the competition. Anastasia also seems interested, although her attention is drawn to one particular treasure shown on the event notice. It is a small, simple doll, rather than anything valuable. When Eftel asks why she wants it, Anastasia becomes embarrassed and cannot explain. He does not pressure her, and with enough time remaining before the day ends, the 3 of them decide to enter the hunt together. The organizers have concealed every prize with shape-shifting magic, so ordinary searching will not reveal them. Merlin suggests using perfect dispel, but Eftel points out that the city is covered with many unrelated spells. Erasing all of them at once could disable protections, tools, and other magic across the entire town, creating chaos. Instead, he examines the structure of the treasure spell and decides to interfere only with the exact formula used to hide the prizes. Merlin is amazed because the precision required is like passing a thread through the eye of a needle, but Eftel treats it as a reasonable solution. He casts a focused level 5 spell that identifies and removes only the selected transformations. Hidden treasures begin appearing in places that had looked completely ordinary. The group searches through alleys, near buildings, under objects, and around the city's trees and bridges. Anastasia eagerly gathers each newly revealed prize while Merlin follows the magical traces, allowing their team to move through the contest far more efficiently than any normal participant. By the end of the hunt, Eftel's group has collected enough treasure to win the hot spring tickets. Anastasia is grateful, but the prize she values most is the small doll she noticed earlier. When Eftel looks closely at it, he realizes that its face resembles his own. Anastasia admits that this is why she wanted it, then becomes deeply embarrassed when he asks whether she prefers the doll even to the hot spring trip. Her reaction makes the answer obvious. Eftel does not tease her cruelly and simply accepts that the little object has special meaning to her. As evening falls, the group returns to Merlin's estate with their prizes. What began as a casual way to pass the time has given Anastasia something personal that she chose for herself, rather than an item selected by a master. Her shy attachment to the doll also shows how quickly Eftel's kindness has become important to her. That night, Merlin asks to speak with Eftel in private. She claims she inspected Anastasia while they were bathing to judge whether the girl was suitable to serve him, but Eftel immediately rejects that reasoning and insists that he and Anastasia do not share that kind of relationship. Merlin then reveals the real reason for the conversation. She saw the magical crest on Anastasia's body and recognized it as a special form of slave spell. Keeping someone with that mark nearby could be as dangerous as holding an unexploded weapon, and Merlin wants to know whether Eftel understands the risk. Eftel confirms that he does. Anastasia's condition is not something he overlooked, but he has still chosen to keep her by his side. When Merlin continues objecting, the stronger personality from Eftel's past briefly rises to the surface and firmly tells her that the decision is final. Merlin immediately recognizes that this is not the timid student she once knew, but the judgment of her true master. She apologizes, and Eftel reassures her that he knows exactly what he is doing. The following day, Eftel and Anastasia arrive at Altina Magic Academy in their new uniforms. Their appearance immediately attracts attention. The academy primarily serves demons and other magically gifted races, so the students cannot understand why a human has been admitted. Anastasia explains that humans are considered a lesser race here and that their classmates are not used to seeing one among them. Eftel dislikes the hostility, but he remains grateful for the opportunity to study magic in any environment. He hopes that if he keeps a low profile, he can enjoy a peaceful school life and focus on research. That hope begins fading as soon as they enter the classroom. Students whisper openly about his smell, his race, and whether a human could possibly survive at an elite institution. Eftel quietly asks Anastasia to take a seat with him, trying to ignore the stares, but she notices that the entire class is already preparing to judge her master. A group of students directly questions how Eftel gained admission. They assume he must be the child of a powerful human family who used money and political influence to force the academy to accept him. Their guess is uncomfortably close to part of the truth, since Merlin personally arranged his enrollment, but their conclusion about his ability is completely wrong. Abe Portes, the highest-ranked student in the class, declares that Altina is an institution reserved for the magical elite. He cannot accept sharing a classroom with a human who supposedly cannot use magic. An elf student admits that Abe's language is crude, but she also believes in judging people by ability and warns Eftel to stay out of their sight if he cannot keep up. Eftel reflects that demons generally possess greater magical talent than humans. Even Anastasia can use level 3 magic, while Fraser considered magic difficult despite reaching level 2. 400 years have passed, but the world's assumptions about racial talent remain largely unchanged. Homeroom begins with an unexpected announcement. Before introducing the transfer students, the academy reveals that their instructor has been replaced by Merlin herself. The class erupts in excitement because the headmistress almost never teaches ordinary lessons. Abe proudly assumes she heard about his outstanding grades and came to guide him personally. Merlin looks at him and asks who he is. After Abe introduces himself as the class's #1 student, she calmly explains that he is not the reason she came. She points to Eftel and announces that she chose to teach this class because he enrolled today. Eftel immediately realizes that her declaration will destroy any chance of remaining unnoticed. When the students conclude that he must be an influential noble's son, Merlin criticizes their rigid assumptions. A magician who can see reality only through prejudice is third-rate. She orders everyone to observe Eftel carefully, promising that meeting him will overturn everything they believe about humans and magical ability. Merlin then respectfully asks Eftel to cooperate, publicly making the headmistress's extraordinary regard for him impossible to ignore. The moment class pauses, students surround Eftel and demand to know who he really is. Anastasia tries to explain that Merlin must have a reason for taking such an interest in him, but the attention only grows worse. Some students invent a vulgar rumor that Merlin teaches human children as charity and gives special private attention to attractive boys. They decide Eftel must be her personal favorite rather than a capable magician. Eftel refuses to reveal his identity, yet he does object when they insult Merlin as an old woman. Abe becomes angry that a human would correct him, turning a foolish rumor into another confrontation. Eftel backs away because he wants no part in the argument, but the damage is already done. Merlin's attempt to make the class respect him has instead placed him at the center of every student's suspicion, jealousy, and curiosity. Class activities then begin, and the students must choose representatives for an upcoming competition between classes. One remaining position requires a specialist in magical analysis and spell inspection. Eftel refuses to volunteer, because serious competition can awaken the aggressive personality he has been trying to control. Merlin asks for another confident candidate, and explains that the result will affect their academic evaluations. Abe raises his hand, certain that his inspection skills are among the best in the year. His classmates agree that he is the obvious choice, and Merlin reluctantly accepts that he is qualified. However, her expression shows that this is not the outcome she originally wanted. She asks whether anyone else wishes to compete, opening the possibility of a second candidate or a challenge to Abe's position. To everyone's surprise, Anastasia raises her hand. She does not volunteer herself. Instead, she nominates Eftel. The classroom falls silent as she recommends the same human whom the others have spent the entire morning calling talentless. Merlin responds with a pleased smile, while Abe sees the nomination as an arrogant challenge to his status. Eftel looks at Anastasia in disbelief because she has placed him directly into the kind of public competition he wanted to avoid. Even so, Anastasia's choice is not careless. She has seen him analyze complicated magic, break a level 8 seal, isolate a single spell from an entire city's magical network, and perform techniques beyond the understanding of ordinary students. By nominating him, she openly declares her trust in his ability. The decision sets Eftel against the Academy's top student in the selection process, ending his first day with his peaceful school life already slipping out of reach. Altena Magic Academy holds a practice match to choose the class representative for the upcoming interclass competition. The final position will go to either Eftel or Abe Portis, but Merlin forbids both of them from using magic. Their swordsmanship alone will decide the winner. Eftel has no desire to attract more attention, so he plans to avoid Abe's opening attack, exchange a few convincing blows, and then lose naturally. Abe refuses to attack until Eftel properly raises his sword, because defeating an unprepared opponent would not satisfy his pride. When the match begins, Abe launches a light fainting kick. Eftel expects it to be harmless, but his body reacts on instinct and counters with far more force than intended. Abe is struck and defeated almost immediately. The stunned class cannot understand how a supposedly inferior human overwhelmed its top student. To explain the result, the others decide Merlin must be studying a new curriculum based on human close combat, since humans are believed to be poor at magic but physically capable. Eftel agrees with their theory, because it is safer than revealing the truth, and Merlin declares him the winner. That evening, Eftel and Anastasia eat together at the estate. Anastasia praises him for defeating another powerful opponent so easily, but Eftel says Abe simply was not as strong as everyone claimed. She then asks what he would do if strength alone could not solve a problem. Eftel answers that he would continue working until the situation no longer seemed impossible. Anastasia asks whether that determination would remain even against a cruel destiny that could not be escaped. Eftel says yes. His entire reason for entering the academy is to overcome the limits that once seemed absolute, so he is already confronting such a fate. His answer confirms what Anastasia expected, but it also makes her compare herself to him. While Eftel keeps challenging his future, she still sees herself as a slave trapped by a position and a contract she cannot change. Anastasia admits that she feels useless because Eftel has given her protection, food, clothing, and dignity while asking for nothing in return. Believing that service is the only thing she can offer, she tries to repay him in the way a slave has been taught to please a master. Eftel immediately stops her. He accepts the sincerity of her gratitude, but tells her he would be much happier simply sharing dinner with her than receiving that kind of service. Eating together and seeing her enjoy the meal is already enough. He pours her a drink, reminds her that the meat will become cold, and invites her back to the table as his companion. Anastasia finally sits with him and begins eating. When emotion overwhelms her, Eftel gently tells her not to cry, and jokes that good meat gives people strength. For a short time, the two of them enjoy a warm and peaceful meal, but Anastasia's questions reveal that she is still hiding a burden she believes she must face alone. The peace ends when Merlin reports that Raikiri and several other artifacts have disappeared from the estate's vault. The Guardian allowed Anastasia to enter because she was recognized as a resident, and she vanished after taking the treasures. Merlin concludes that Anastasia's special slave crest forced her to steal them for another master. Eftel had always known that the mark might activate, so he does not regard her actions as a voluntary betrayal. A normal slave contract cannot order someone to commit a crime or die, but the special crest bypasses those protections. Breaking it means challenging the divine power that guarantees the contract itself. Merlin warns that failure could unleash enough destruction to threaten the country Eftal once saved. Eftal still refuses to abandon Anastasia. Just as he accepted responsibility for Merlin when he rescued her long ago, he will care for Anastasia until the end. He also knows she would never willingly betray him. Fortunately, Eftal placed tracking magic on the artifacts in advance. He follows the signal, determined to recover both Reincarnated and Anastasia from her true master. Anastasia delivers the stolen treasures to Abe Portes at his family's estate. Abe praises her for taking Merlin's valuables and is especially pleased by Reincarnated, the legendary sword associated with the Demon King's forces 400 years earlier. He admits that seeing Anastasia arrive at the academy as a transfer student surprised him, but her access to Eftal and Merlin made the theft extremely valuable. Abe then orders her to arrange another practice match so he can confront Eftal again. Anastasia hesitates because she knows how powerful Eftal is, but Abe grabs her and reminds her that she is allowed to obey only his commands. The special crest suppresses her resistance, forcing her to submit even when she wants to protect Eftal. Abe notices the conflict in her eyes and becomes angry, making it clear that any loyalty she feels toward her new master is meaningless to him. Abe counts the stolen items and declares that Anastasia has now delivered 5 artifacts for her generation. Combined with the 3 previously stolen by her older sister, her family's assigned quota appears complete. Anastasia briefly believes the inherited obligation may finally be over. Abe immediately destroys that hope. The special slave crest is separate from the artifact quota and will not disappear simply because she completed the current demand. If Anastasia has children, the crest and its duties will be passed to the next generation. Abe says his family will decide what happens to her after consulting his father, then orders her to wait until morning. Left alone, Anastasia remembers every humiliating visit to the Portes estate and feels worse than ever because this time she has betrayed Eftal. She tries to comfort herself with the belief that finishing the 5 artifacts has at least ended the suffering connected to her sister, but memories of her childhood begin returning. In the past, Anastasia grew up in a poor rural household where she was made to feel unwanted. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and angry relatives used that tragedy to blame the child for every hardship. Anastasia's older sister, Tatiana, spent long periods away from home earning money, only to be criticized when she returned with too little. The family complained about Tatiana's clothing and accused her of enjoying herself while everyone else suffered. Anastasia joined the attacks because she believed the cruel things adults told her. She shouted that Tatiana never helped, always complained, and should stop returning if she hated the family so much. Tatiana did not defend herself. She accepted the insults, said goodbye, and left again. Anastasia believed her sister disliked her, never realizing that Tatiana was working under a far more terrible obligation to keep the rest of the family alive. During another visit home, members of the Portes clan arrive and reveal that Tatiana has died. Instead of offering sympathy, Anastasia's father presents his younger daughter as a replacement servant. The Portes family immediately begins a succession ritual. Anastasia is taken to a dark ceremonial chamber, where the special slave crest is carved into her body. She learns that Tatiana supposedly made a mistake while completing the contract, so Anastasia must now become the clan's slave. Her duty is to provide 5 magical artifacts in a single generation, and then pass the same obligation to her descendants. She must enter noble households under the identity of a slave, gain access to their treasures, and steal rare magical tools. Tatiana had already obtained 3 items, leaving Anastasia responsible for the remaining 2. The clan warns her not to be discovered and killed as her sister was. When the ritual activates, the crest does more than bind Anastasia. It floods her mind with inherited memories and reveals the history she had never been told. Roughly 300 years earlier, her family fought a territorial war against another demon clan. After they lost, they were condemned for killing members of their own race and forced to bear the special slave contract forever. Anastasia also sees the truth about Tatiana. Her sister knew the entire burden and had given up her own freedom to carry the family's curse alone. Tatiana deliberately acted cold whenever she returned home because she expected to be captured or killed and wanted Anastasia to suffer less when that happened. The sister Anastasia, accused of selfishness, had actually protected her until the end. Overcome by guilt, Anastasia realizes that Tatiana always loved her, while she responded with hatred because she understood nothing about the sacrifice being made for her. Back in the present, Abe wakes Anastasia and announces that the agreement is not finished after all. Because Tatiana's contribution no longer counts the way Anastasia believed, Anastasia must personally steal 3 more artifacts. As long as the special crest remains, she has no choice but to obey. Abe says his father is delighted to have such a capable slave, especially one who can obtain a weapon like Reincarnated. After she collects the remaining items, the family intends to pair her with a man of their choosing, force her to produce children, and carve the same crest into the next generation. Only then might they consider releasing her. Anastasia asks what meaning Tatiana's death and devotion had if the Portes family can change the requirements whenever it wants. Abe dismisses her sister's feelings as worthless, showing that the contract was never designed to end through honest service. As a final act of cruelty, Abe tells Anastasia the hidden truth about the ancient territorial war. The official history inherited through the crest is a lie. The ancestors of the Portas clan were the ones who began the conflict, seized Anastasia's family's land and titles, and then blamed their victims for killing fellow demons. They used that false crime to impose a slave contract that would continue through every future generation. Anastasia's bloodline was never repaying a legitimate debt. From the beginning, the curse was a tool created to steal their property, freedom, labor, and descendants. Abe laughs at Anastasia's shocked expression and says Tatiana made the same face when she learned the truth. This revelation finally destroys Anastasia's remaining belief that obedience might someday bring freedom. Anastasia quietly excuses herself and leaves the room. Abe assumes she has run away because she cannot accept reality, but he feels no concern. The special crest automatically drags its bearer back to the recognized master at least once every 6 months, so he believes she can never escape him. Wherever she goes, the contract will eventually return her to the Portes family and force her to continue stealing. Abe remains confident that destiny itself is on his side. Anastasia, however, now knows that every sacrifice made by Tatiana and every order imposed on their family came from a deliberate lie. The episode ends with her outside Abe's control for the moment, carrying the weight of that truth while the magical contract still threatens to pull her back. Anastasia walks alone through the city at night, still hearing Abe's warning that the special slave crest will automatically return her to him every 6 months. Several men notice that she is unprotected and begin following her. When they realize the magical link to her master appears broken, they decide she can be taken without consequences. Anastasia does not resist. After learning that her family's suffering was built on a lie, she feels that the world contains nothing but cruelty. The crest prevents her from escaping through death, running away cannot free her, and every path seems to lead back to the Portes family. Just as she gives up, Eftel appears and drives the men away, declaring that Anastasia is his companion. His arrival breaks through her despair, but she still cannot understand why he followed someone who stole from him. Eftel asks why Anastasia took Raikiri without saying anything, then corrects himself. The real question is why she never trusted him enough to explain the contract. Anastasia insists that the special crest is absolute because a god protects it, and no individual can challenge that power. Eftel refuses to accept those limits. He finally reveals the truth he has kept hidden from her. He is Eftel Orkat, the legendary magician known 400 years ago as one of the 4 emperors. After dying, he reincarnated in his current body. Anastasia has traveled beside him, watched him use impossible magic, and seen how little the world's normal rules mean to him. He tells her not to measure his ability by ordinary common sense. To prove his words, he demonstrates several spells, including a level 4 movement technique, level 8 perfect dispel, and the power connected to his former level 10 self. Eftel explains that he accepted Anastasia while already understanding her condition. He will take responsibility for rescuing her, so she can stop carrying the burden alone and leave everything that follows to him. Meanwhile, Abe brings Raikiri to a wealthy buyer and boasts that the Portas family possesses treasures worthy of the highest nobility. The appraiser recognizes the sword as a historically priceless national treasure and offers 5,000 gold coins. Abe accepts immediately, pleased that Anastasia has delivered something far more valuable than the artifacts stolen from Edwards. The buyer does not have the entire payment with him and promises to return, so Abe treats the agreement as complete and invites him to continue drinking. Abe is already calculating the profit from the 3 additional artifacts he intends to force Anastasia to steal. He believes her inherited contract will provide an endless supply of wealth and that neither Anastasia nor her future children will ever be able to refuse him. The next morning, Anastasia returns to the Portes estate much sooner than Abe expects. He assumes she has accepted that escape is impossible, but she looks directly at him and demands that he return Eftel's katana. Abe mocks her quiet voice until she repeats the demand more firmly. Before confronting him, Anastasia asks Eftel whether he is angry about what she did. Eftel answers that anger would make sense only if she had chosen the theft herself. Anastasia says a slave cannot possess independent intentions while the crest controls her. Eftel challenges that belief by reminding her of Tatiana. Her sister could not disobey the crest, yet she still chose to protect Anastasia, accept hatred, and sacrifice herself. The contract controlled Tatiana's actions, but it never owned her heart. That devotion was her personal will. Anastasia finally understands the lesson Eftel has repeated since they met. She has the right to call something hateful when it hurts her, and she is allowed to possess wishes that belong only to herself. For years, she spent all her strength avoiding punishment and accepted that resistance was pointless. Tatiana proved that even inside an unbreakable contract, a person can choose what her life means. Anastasia admits that she was wrong to surrender before trying. She then makes her first clear request based entirely on her own desire. Raikiri belongs to Eftel, and she wants it returned. Standing before Abe, she holds the sword close and repeats that demand. Her voice shakes, but this time, The words are not produced by a master, a crest, or an inherited duty. They are Anastasia's own decision. Abe is enraged that his slave dares to oppose him. He threatens to force her to produce the next generation of servants and then discard her once her body is no longer useful. Anastasia understands the punishment waiting for her, but refuses to retreat. She declares that she will no longer obey the Portes family. Abe blames Eftel for giving a member of a supposedly lesser race such ideas and attacks Anastasia. He knocks her to the ground, seizes the sword, and ridicules her belief that Eftel will rescue her. According to him, a human cannot challenge the Portes clan, and Anastasia needs to be tortured until her body remembers who owns it. Even while injured on the grass, she continues glaring at him. Abe raises his weapon and promises to begin by cutting apart the defiant face that no longer shows him fear. Before the blow lands, Eftel steps between them and praises Anastasia for enduring so much. A brief memory reveals that she had previously asked him not to interfere at first. Since the theft had been carried out through her body, she wanted to confront Abe with her own will and take responsibility for choosing a different path. Eftel believed she had already suffered enough, but he respected her request and waited until her life was truly in danger. Now that Anastasia has rejected Abe in her own words, Eftel takes over. He strikes Abe and warns him never to touch her again. Abe cannot believe that the same human has humiliated him twice. Furious, he declares that Eftel and Anastasia have entered Portes territory without permission and will not be allowed to leave alive. Abe calls for the estate's private army, boasting that 300 elite guards protect the Portes family. They include specialists in magic, martial arts, and swordsmanship, all hired with enormous wealth. Armed soldiers surround Eftel and Anastasia, and Abe orders them to kill the intruder. Eftel does not retreat or begin a long incantation. He casts level 7 Chaos Weed, causing overwhelming magic to erupt across the estate. The guards who mocked a human for attempting magic are swept away before they can reach him. The blast tears through the garden, throws fighters into the air, and devastates the grounds around the mansion. Abe watches the army he trusted disappear almost instantly, while Anastasia sees that Eftel's promise was never empty confidence. The power standing between her and the Portes family is greater than anything the clan prepared to control her. Even after losing his guards and watching his estate collapse, Abe insists he has not been defeated. Merlin then arrives with information gathered during her investigation. Reincarnated has already been sold, confirming the Portes family's involvement in stolen artifacts. She has also uncovered a long list of criminal activities surrounding the clan, including trafficking magical items, smuggling drugs, and maintaining close connections with local criminal organizations. Eftel recognizes some of the men from the estate and casually notes that they were among the people his spell blew away. As headmistress, Merlin declares that Abe's conduct makes him unfit to remain at Altena Magic Academy. She uses her authority to expel him. The status Abe used to place himself above Eftel and Anastasia disappears along with his guards and reputation. Anastasia apologizes to Eftel for stealing Reincarnated and causing the entire conflict. He tells her to stop blaming herself and asks whether confronting Abe has helped clear some of the pain in her heart. Anastasia answers that she will no longer give up. Whatever destiny, contract, or social position stands before her, only she can live her own life. The special crest still exists, but it no longer defines every choice she makes. She thanks Eftel for helping her understand that freedom begins with recognizing her own will. Merlin stands nearby as Anastasia returns to Eftel's side, not because Abe's magic commands her, but because she has chosen where she belongs. The confrontation ends with Abe injured and stripped of his place at the academy, while Eftel and Anastasia leave the ruined Portes estate together. Reincarnated must still be recovered from the buyer, and the divine contract itself has not yet been broken, but Anastasia is no longer facing either problem in silence. She has openly resisted the family that enslaved her bloodline, protected Tatiana's memory, and accepted that her own desires have value. Eftel has also revealed his true identity to her, deepening the trust between them. The episode closes after this turning point, with Anastasia determined to live according to her own decisions rather than the false destiny imposed by the Portes clan.